let's take a moment to have a meaningful and thought-provoking discussion about the decision-making process for executives at top organizations and how their impact affects organizational culture. According to a report from TalentLMS and Epignosis, 96% of executives claim they embody a growth mindset. Additionally, 89% of senior leaders agree future business success is dependent upon leaders who embody this very mindset. This is good news for my friend Zoe Thompson. She's a leadership and performance coach with over 2 decades of experience. She helps leaders and organizations become more effective, reactive to intentional leadership, build self-sufficient teams, and helps them to build a mindset of success that looks as good as it feels. She's got a former police background. She's also a former elite athlete and successful business owner. She works with her clients to help them scale their impact across the UK. She helps her clients to align their success by mastering their mindsets, strategy, and habits needed to achieve elite performance and elevate productivity without compromising their values, well-being, or freedom. She developed the PIIPS Framework for aligned success, which includes 5 key pillars, which include plan, identify, intention, performance, and structure, all intended to build sustainable and aligned success in all areas of life. And Thompson joined me this week all the way from the UK to tell me more. I'm Kevin McShann. Let's have this conversation. I'll take a moment to welcome you to the program today, and I'm super excited to learn how you're making a difference in the world. It's great to see you, my friend, and thank you so very much for a few minutes, my friend.
That's my pleasure.
Absolutely. So I know that you have quite the interesting background, my friend. You're a former senior police leader, an athlete, and a successful business owner who now specializes in executive coaching and helping leaders develop and establish business owners who want to scale their impact across the UK, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about your background, my friend, and what makes you so fabulous.
Thank you. I don't get called fabulous very often, so I'll take that. Thank you. So I started working for the police at 18. So originally my plan was that I wanted to be a police officer, but I was firstly too young, and secondly they weren't recruiting. So my first role within the police was going in as a civilian. And actually, to cut a very long story short, I didn't end up getting through when I did apply to be a police officer, but ended up doing 20 years in civilian roles. So we call them police staff over here, but I think you call them civilians. So I actually did 20 years in the service, and within 3 years the first leadership role came up, which I went for, and yeah, my career kind of took off from there. So 20 years in total, 17 of those were in leadership. And when I left, which actually I left through redundancy, I was in a business change role, so I'd done lots of different operational roles. Loved my time there, but unfortunately, the role came to an end through redundancy. There weren't any other opportunities there for me. So I decided to take all the bits that I loved doing. And what I always loved about leadership was the self-development side of it, and having teams and building potential and looking at training and succession planning. So I took all of that and created the business. And that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years.
Absolutely, and I know you work with your clients all about mastering their mindset strategies and habits needed to elevate performance without compromising their values or well-being, my friend. So tell me, how do you give the clients you've worked with the tools to master their mindset in order to achieve success? Tell me more, my friend.
So in my experience, a lot of the people that I work with, the biggest blocker for them is themselves. They'll come quite often initially when we talk, they'll feel that that blocker is something external, but quite often when we peel back those layers, it's their own belief system, it's their own confidence. They've got the knowledge, they've got the skills, they're just not taking the action because they either lack that confidence or they've got old beliefs, old stories that they're telling themselves that are holding them back. And then the other side of it is that they look success looks really good on paper, but it doesn't feel good, and quite often that's because their values are out of alignment. So that's the work that I do. I'm trained as an NLP master practitioner, so alongside your sort of standard coaching, executive coaching training and methodologies, I use NLP as well, just to really get down to the root cause of what's holding them back or what is out of alignment. And then once we get that piece together, they're off and running, and quite often things can move quite quickly for them, which is very exciting to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, so I want to talk to you about the importance of the way we make decisions, because our friends over at LinkedIn say that 94% of leaders have to change the way they make decisions in the last have changed the way rather they've made decisions in the last 3 years to gain better control and confidence, largely due to data overload and the high stakes pressure they're under, according to LinkedIn. So tell me about the importance of having clarity in making decisions and what that tells you about the state of leadership confidence across organizations today. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
That's such a great question. And I think this is the challenge. We've got more information at our fingertips now, but less clarity because there's so much information. I mean, when I started with the police, I started the year Google kind of went live.
Mm-hmm.
So computers didn't exist. Computers did exist, but definitely not in the way that they do now. So for me to find information when I first started working, I had to go through manuals, or I had to walk around the police station and find somebody who knew the answer, who had that experience. Now we've got all of that information at our fingertips, but it's almost too much information. And then we get that decision-making paralysis of not knowing what decision to make. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge I see with leaders at the moment, is that they have more information, less clarity. And actually, from a leadership perspective now, we find that the teams in workplaces, they're not looking to leaders for information and for answers. They're looking for direction and decisions because that information is very readily available. What they need is clarity. They need support in making those decisions and how to prioritize, and they need that direction as well. So leaders that are able to make very strong decisions and quickly are the sort of strongest leaders, because that's what people want. They want human-centered and empathy, but they also want people that are confident in making those decisions and cutting through all of the information that's available to make that decision and help move the team forward. Otherwise, everybody, if a leader is stuck, the whole team gets stuck.
Absolutely. And to that point, I also wanted your thoughts on this study from Seton Hall University that found last year that 54 to 56, 56% of leaders experience long-term and chronic what they call leadership doubt regarding their effectiveness in making decisions which makes needed the constant need for self improvement and self analyzing the way we make decisions. And I'm curious to get your thoughts on how we can give the leaders the confidence they need to make decisions that benefit the entire organization. Because, I believe if we give leaders the confidence to make sure that everyone knows that they're a part of an organization, my friend, we're all rowing in the same boat. And I'm wondering your
Yeah.
thoughts on that notion, my friend.
But I think that belonging is so important, isn't it? A feeling that you're part of something. We know, I mean, that's a human psychological need to feel like we belong, feel like we contribute, feel like there's that significance is there. And I do think when we've got confident and self-assured leaders, that has that ripple effect across teams as well, because they not only recognize their own potential, they're looking for it in others. And I don't think we can necessarily help people to have that. We can't give confidence. I think confidence is earned through action. What we can do is create a safe space for people to try things they haven't tried before, to start messy, to do things for the first time, to create that safe space for people to step in and try something new. And that psychological safety to say, actually, when you fail, when you get things wrong, we'll use that as a learning rather than as a stick to beat you with. And I think that makes a real difference. And there's certainly the companies that I work with where leaders create that space and they encourage people to do things for the first time, perhaps even before they feel ready, because they have those opportunities to have that experience. That's what creates the confidence. That's what creates that inner belief that they've got what it takes to deal with the challenges in front of them. And that's what builds the confident and resilient teams that most organizations are looking for. So I think if we've got a confident and strong leader that supports and encourages and creates a psychologically safe space for their teams to fail, whatever failing looks like, I think that's what can make a really big difference.
Yeah, and so I'm curious to ask you your opinion on the importance of psychological safety as a whole in terms of building an organizational culture and, the societal pressure that leaders are under to lead today. We live in a 24-hour news cycle, and especially if you're a high profile CEO or you're looking to make your company more visible. The psychological safety that you need to create in an organization is
Mm.
uh, no more important than now because of the societal pressure we're under to succeed. So I'm wondering your thoughts on psychological safety and the linkage between, the societal pressure leaders are under today. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
God, hugest question. Psychological safety for me is probably it's up there in being one of the most important things that leaders can create for their teams. I think we certainly from what I'm seeing from individuals and from leaders that I'm working with, we've got individuals who want empathetic, human centered leaders. They want leaders that put people at the front. So it's not about who knows more. It's not about the experience that leaders have. It's the leadership behavior skills that are most important. And I think that is empathy. And a big part of empathy is someone who is able to create that psychological safety for every individual on their team, regardless of who that individual is, what is important to that individual. we need to create a safe space for everybody. And I think the leaders who have that ability to flex and adapt so that every individual is accommodated and seen and heard and feels safe, the stronger that team becomes. So I think there are lots of external pressures from society. And what we see in society, we see in the workplace, because people don't leave themselves at home. They don't leave the things that concern them. They don't leave the things that are important to them at home. The whole individual comes to work. So leaders who are able to flex and adapt and recognize that every individual needs to be seen and heard, and that full inclusion is just incredibly important. And that's certainly something that I'm seeing the more forward thinking leaders really trying to get, not necessarily get ahead of because it's needed now, but they're certainly looking to increase their skill set to be able to create that environment for their team because they recognize that it's important.
Absolutely, and I know so that you've developed a framework that you put your clients through that aligns their success by using five key principles to plan, identify, intention, performance, and structure to build sustainable and aligned success in all areas of life, my friend. So I'm wondering if you can tell me about the framework and how it works, my friend.
Yeah, sure. So the PIIPS framework is the framework that you're referring to. So this is something that I have used for myself. That's where it came about. I looked at, people kept asking me what did I do that was different? What was it that I did that meant that I could achieve everything that I achieved in my time on this planet so far, in this life cycle so far? And when I looked into it and I looked at all of the things that I did, the five pillars were what really stood out for me. So the first one is plan, because it is really important to plan and have a really clear idea of what it is that we want to happen, what it is that we want to be different, what success looks like for us. Because what success looks like for me might be very different for you. So we need to be really clear on the plan. We need to be really clear on intention. So that's the first I. And this is around not just aligning what it is that we want longer term, but making sure that what we do day to day aligns with what we want longer term, that it really feeds into that bigger vision and values that we have. The second I is identity. And this for me is probably the one of the bigger pieces that people find more of a challenge. So recognizing how we are evolving and what it is that we want to achieve, but how do we need to evolve in terms of our character, in terms of our behavior, in terms of who we are as an individual to get to where we want to get to. So a lot of the work that I do is certainly looking at identity. Performance is the habits that we have, the behaviors that we have, and also what we need to do to protect how we can then show up in that high performance. So sleep, nutrition, being active, taking care of ourselves, making sure that we rest and relax, that we're not kind of full on all of the time. And then the last one is S, which is structure. So we need to have a structure in place that enables all of those other things to happen. And quite often that is where people fall down. So they've got the plan, they're very clear on what it is that they want. They're very clear on who they need to be to achieve that, what habits and behaviors they need to have, but they haven't set up systems or boundaries or a structure and routine to protect and enable all of those other things to happen. So that's the PIIPS framework. That's the five pillars. They don't work in order, but they all work together. And that's for me, for my own experience and also now experience of lots of clients that have worked through that framework, that make sure that success is as good as it looks. It feels as good as it looks. It is exactly how you want it to be, and it aligns with what's most important to you. Because we, especially from a work perspective, we spend a lot of time in work, so we want to make sure that work aligns with who we are as an individual and what is most important to us as an individual.
Absolutely. And as Zoe, from a personal perspective, I have a group of people who work for me as a personal support staff. And I always tell my staff that it's important to protect your mental wellness at work and sort of your emotional safety. I'm curious, based on your experience in executive coaching, the importance of helping your clients also protect their emotional security and safety as well, and how important that is to you as well. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
It's for me, it's huge. And I would say that that's probably one of the leading causes of burnout. A lot of people think it's down to a mismatch of resources. So either too much work, not enough time, or not enough people. But actually, I think one of the fastest tracks to burnout is when we're working in a way that doesn't align with what's important to us. So it has a huge impact on our mental health and our emotional health, and it brings back to that psychological safety as well. When individuals in work are in a workplace where they don't feel safe, or where they can't work in a way that aligns with what's most important to them, that's going to drain both their physical and mental battery faster than anything else. And it doesn't fix itself in a weekend or a week lying on the beach somewhere having a vacation. It just doesn't fix that, because we end up going back into that environment. So for me, it's huge. And if we, from my point of view, from a leadership perspective, it's so important for leaders to recognize that, because they've got the biggest circle of influence in enabling that to happen for individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm interested to ask you this next question because I know that you went through a mindset shift when you when you left the public sector, and I know that you helped your clients through career pivots. So I'm curious to ask you about your mindset shift when you left the public sector and sort of the framework of your mindset as you started over or continued your career in a different direction. What do you think the key is there, my friend?
It was huge for me, and I actually would say that I don't think I recognize how big it would be. So as I said, I was 18 when I first started in the police. So it was such a big part of who I was as a person. All of my adult life was in the police service. All of my experiences were in the police service. And for me, coming out of such an environment where it is such a tight work, everybody kind of pulls together to make things happen, and going from that environment to working solo was a huge shift. So I really had to let go of who I was when I wasn't 8952 Thompson. I had to let go of who I was when I wasn't in a uniform delivering a service to the public or a service to colleagues. And that was a huge shift, not just in the identity, but in mindset as well, of not having this team around me that would help support, make things happen, but actually just being on my own. And one of the biggest things that we always complain about with government agencies and public sector is that it takes a long time to make decisions and make things happen, because it's a big ship to turn. And although I was definitely one of those people that would always complain about how slow things were, I remember sitting as, the first time as a business owner having to make a big decision and realizing that there wasn't somebody to call, there wasn't a list of people that I needed to run it past before that decision got authorized, and realizing that it was just me, myself, and I had to trust my own decisions. I had to have confidence in my own ability to make things happen and make it all work. So huge mindset shifts and big identity shifts as well. And having that discipline to still be consistent in the way I showed up to work in the same way that I did in my roles in the police service, of being committed, doing what I said I was going to do, showing up and doing the work that needed to be done, whether I felt like it or not, because there wasn't a boss that was checking in on me. So there were a lot of the habits and behaviors and skills and experience that I could transfer over. And then there were also lots of new things to learn as well. So just having that open mindset of being willing to learn, but also having a trust and confidence in myself that, I wasn't starting fresh, I was just starting something new, and that I had a lot of tools in the toolbox that would be able to help me.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to talk to you about the importance of personal autonomy in the workplace and really giving
Mm.
employees, the autonomy to sort of control their own destiny. Because I know you believe that personal identity and performance plays a big role in effective leadership. And I'm curious to get your message to leaders about giving the people that they're in charge of leading, the personal autonomy to make decisions, because I know that we both believe if you do that, they're more invested in getting a positive outcome. And what are your thoughts on how identity is related to performance at work, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
It's so important. And I don't think leaders necessarily recognize how much of a negative impact it is when we jump in and we rescue and we help and we give people the answers rather than guide them to make the decisions. So when we look at what humans need, they need competence, autonomy, and belonging. That's the three fundamentals, and they come through in the workplace. And as a leader, we want to be able to encourage all three of those things. So when we make decisions, or when we jump in and rescue and we give them the answers and we don't teach them how to get to the answers themselves, or we don't teach them how to have the skill set that we've got, not only do we take away that autonomy, we also risk their own confidence in their competence, and that has a huge impact. So one of the things that I talk about to leaders is recognizing that actually you think you're being helpful. There's a lot of leaders who think they're being helpful when they jump in and give the answer, when they jump in and make things right. But actually, in the short term, it creates a fix. But actually, in the longer term, it creates a much bigger problem. So recognizing that actually, when we enable our staff and we give that autonomy, we are creating a much more self-sufficient individuals and a self-sufficient and resilient team, which is what all feeds into a high-performing team. So sometimes we've just got to let go and stand next to somebody rather than roll our sleeves up and fix. The autonomy is incredibly important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, if you'll indulge me, I want to share a story with you. So, I used to be the lead job developer for the YMCA in my hometown, and
Okay.
we worked in a small office. There were only five people in my department, and we all worked in the same office. And for better and for better or for worse, my boss's desk was directly next to mine. So I made the mistake because I am a recovering email perfectionist. So when an email comes into my inbox, I automatically felt like I had to answer it. So
Mm.
I answered an email after 4:30, and I answered an email. I think it was at 6 o'clock. I had responded to my boss when I got home, and the next day she looked at me and she said, when you close your laptop at 4:30, you don't automatically have to respond just because I sent you an email, because I don't respond until the next day anyway, because I have to give myself that personal space to sort of
Mm.
rejuvenate and recover. And it's something that I've taken throughout my professional life since that day. That just because an email is in your inbox doesn't necessarily mean you have to answer it. So I'm curious to ask you about the importance of promoting the fact that your employees also need that personal time to recharge and rejuvenate. What are your thoughts there, my friend?
Absolutely. And I would love there to be more bosses like your boss that really hold that and really encourage their staff to make sure that they have that full break. We know from a performance level that actually the more we incorporate rest and recovery into routines, the higher the performance. It's why athletes do a deload week before they compete. It's why sports people rest before a game day. It's incredibly important. And it's not just a physical element, it's the mental element as well. So when we give people that space to go and switch off and do things that charge their battery and re-energize and revitalize, it makes a huge difference. So it's a challenge with technology, isn't it? I mean, I first started working when that technology didn't exist. So when you walked out of the office at the end of the day, that was it. You had absolutely no idea what was going on until you walked back in and logged on the next morning. Um, there's a balance between just because we can doesn't mean we have to. And so we have to really create our own boundaries around having that time to do the things that are most important to us. And that's one of the key things I help leaders with, is to be more efficient and more effective with the time that they have, but also really understand what those boundaries are and what's most important. Because if you are logging on and working on in the evenings, you are saying yes to work, you're saying no to something else. And if you're saying no to something else, chances are you're saying no to something that is really important to you. So we need to make sure that that balance is there. The balance will look different for different people. You know, some people might prefer a later start and a later finish. Some people might prefer an earlier start and an early finish. Some people like to have a couple of hours off in the afternoon and break up the day. There isn't a one size fits all. We need to make sure that actually, if we really want a high performing team, that we trust and empower individuals to have that autonomy to determine what works best for them and also works best for the business. It needs to be in balance, and I'm okay, you're okay. You know, and a big part of leadership is helping that balance of your individuals being okay and the business being okay, and making sure that it works for both. Yeah, the rest and recovery is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I'm curious to get your thoughts on this interesting study from Deloitte that found that 70% of business executives and leaders admit that sometimes because of the sheer volume of data when making decisions and the sort of indecisiveness in making decisions, give some trepidation to making final decisions at all, my friend. So, how do you think we can minimize the data and make decisions more confident and seamless? My friend, what are your thoughts then?
It's exactly as you said. It's trust in your own judgment to make those decisions and not keep looking for more data. So it's that clarity that we were talking about earlier is just that, yeah, there's too much information is too is it just makes things a little bit muddy and a little bit less clear. And leaders who are really have that self-assurance and that confidence in their own ability and their own decision-making skills don't need a lot of information. They know what information to go and look for rather than gathering all of the information and then try and work out what's needed. And I think that's the biggest difference is, you know, a decision needs to be made. You identify very quickly what information, what data you need to make that decision. You make the decision and then you reflect and you review as you go on. And if more information comes in, you can reassess and make a different decision. But I think a lot of leaders who don't have that confidence in their ability to make decisions are gathering in more information. They don't know which information is relevant and they're waiting for more information to come through. So there's that hesitation and that delay in making the decision because they're waiting for more information to come through. So again, that confidence in your own ability and in your own decision making skills is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I want to talk to you about resilience and adaptability in the workplace and the importance for employers to really encourage adaptability and resilience because without resilience of people in a workplace, then productivity is going to suffer. And there's research out there from McKinsey and Company that suggests that employees who are more adaptable tend to have an edge in managing change and adversity, my friend. And I'm wondering your thoughts behind that concept
Mm.
and notion, my friend.
No, I completely agree. So from my perspective, there's resilient individuals and then there's resilient teams, and they're two different things. So we want resilient individuals. We also want to create a space and create a resilient team. And the resilience and the adaptability is exactly what you're talking about there. So when we talk about resilience, by definition, we're talking about the ability to flex and adapt as things happen. It's not just the recovery after the event, it's the ability and confidence to be able to flex and adapt as things arise. So if we've got a resilient team and we've got that structure in place, we've got an operating system in place that means we have a resilient team, then as a team, we respond really well as it happens. And we also want resilient individuals as well who've got that confidence in their capability that when something happens, even if they don't know how they're going to respond to it, they've got the confidence in their competence to say, okay, I don't know how I'm going to deal with this, but I know we're going to get through this and we're going to come out the other side. Some of that needs to be encouraged and supported by the leader themselves. Some of it is through their peers of having a team that pull together. But we want teams that see the challenge and see it as a challenge rather than a threat. And that for me is what resilience is about, is not always going to get excited about things that happen, but actually if you have that element where something happens and the team see it as a challenge to overcome rather than a threat, they see this as, okay, we're going to be cool, we're going to be okay, we're going to pull this together, we're going to work it out, and we're going to come out through the other side absolutely fine. That makes such a big difference to the working environment for every single one of those individuals. So it's also what, in my opinion, feeds into a high performing team as well, because the minute something happens, they don't fall to pieces, they rise to the challenge. They're like, yeah, we got this, we can make this work, and we're going to come out the other side.
Absolutely. And so, as you know, I'm someone that was born with a disability, and I often tell organizations when I give speeches that I have been forced to navigate a world that, quite frankly, doesn't uh, set me up to succeed because of a disability. And I want to talk to you about diversity, equity, and inclusion in the workplace because it's certainly gone through a changing definition. And I think that leaders are sort of missing the mark by excluding individuals with disabilities in the workplace because I truly believe that they can provide a competitive advantage over the competition, my friend. So I'm curious to ask you from your perspective of executive coaching and leadership development, what sort of competitive advantage do you believe that people with disabilities could add to a workplace if they're regularly infused into it, my friend? What are your thoughts there?
This is all what we've been talking about, isn't it? I mean, in my experience, the people that I have met, they who are either born with disabilities or those disabilities have come later in life, are probably the most resilient people that I've met, and they have tools in their toolbox that I will never have in mind, but they also have very different perspectives, very different world viewpoints can be that can really contribute to a workplace. And even if we expand that thinking to DE and I in general, the analogy that I use with the leaders that I work with is that we need people who see the world differently and who have different experiences and different perspectives. We, as a leader, don't want a team of people sitting around the table who just blindly agree with us. Firstly, that means we haven't created a safe space for people to speak up and share openly, or we've just recruited people who think like us, and that isn't going to be helpful either. So the more we have in terms of that diversity within our teams, and we've got different life experiences, different challenges that have been overcome, different tools in the toolbox, different ways of thinking, different perspectives, different approaches, the more we create that whole team environment, and the more we are going to grow from that, because that's more strengths to add into the mix. So I think people who overlook that are most certainly missing out. And I see leaders as being like the conductor in an orchestra, and we want different musicians, and we want different instruments. And that to me is what really brings amazing teams together, is when it's inclusive and not exclusionary, and everybody has a seat at the table, and also everybody has a voice at the table that is heard. And that is what's incredibly important for me, and that's helping. For me, it's really important to help leaders to see the benefits of that, and what that brings into the mix and into a high performing team.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got two questions left for you. The first of those two questions is this. I'm curious to ask you about the connection between effective leadership and clear communication. And how do you think those two things are interconnected, my friend?
Well, for me, the effective communication is when your communication is understood in the way that you intended it. And so effective leadership is requires effective communication. We need to be clear in what we're saying. We need to be clear in what we're doing, and for our teams to really understand in the way that we intended it. And those that who are effective leaders are efficient leaders, and they are intentional leaders. They're very clear about what they want to achieve, what they want to deliver on, and also how they want to deliver and how they want their team to deliver that as well. So clear, good, effective leaders are good, clear communicators. It's definitely the two are very much in the mix. And I think a lot of leaders avoid, you know, leaders that have less confidence will avoid those more difficult conversations, or their communication is less clear. So in my experience, the most effective leaders are the most clear communicators. I think it's one and the same.
Yeah, absolutely. And so my final question for you today has to do with legacy, my friend, and how do you want your own personal and professional legacy to be defined?
Oh, I love this question. So for for me, I think personally and professionally, they probably overlap. It's really important for me to, and this, I always worry when I say this out loud, it sounds a little bit cheesy, but I always try to leave people and the place a little bit better than when I stepped into it. So certainly, whether that's personal interactions or professional interactions, I want people to come out of that experience with me either knowing a little bit more, or feeling a little bit better, or just having that positive impact. I'm not somebody who wants buildings named after them, or some kind of long lasting building or school or something that's named after me. I'm not interested in any of that, but I do want people to remember their interaction with me and feel that they left that interaction feeling better, knowing better, or doing better.
Yeah, absolutely. And my friend, tell me finally, if people want to get connected with you, what's the best way they can do that?
I would love for people to connect. So my website is zoethompson.uk. I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Instagram, I'm on YouTube. So if whichever is people's preferred platform, you can come and find me by searching my name.
Absolutely. Well, my friend is someone who wants to move the needle of progress forward and inclusive leadership. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I want to tip my hat to you for all the great contributions you've made in the space of effective and inclusive leadership, my friend. I really enjoyed our time together, and I want to thank you for being here to engage in conversation and answering my questions. It's most appreciated,
Oh,
my
thank you.
friend.
Thank you very much for having me as a guest. It's been really, really lovely talking to you.